Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm going to do my 14.20 jungle tier list, so if you have content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There were a couple of changes this patch, mostly focused around rectifying some of the outliers from 14.19. This focused on things like Fated Ashes, Leandries, certain champions, Udyr, Shyvana, Skarner, all got nerfed. We saw buffs towards Lee Sin, and there are some other shifts around, so let's talk about it. D tier is going to once again consist of two champions, but it is Rengar and Silas. In Rengar's case, he's underperforming at the moment, even in the hands of the best players of the champion. This pick is still definitely doing worse. The lethality itemization got hit pretty aggressively. The likes of Profane Hydra were one of the items which went down the furthest, and Rengar kind of used that item to consistently keep up his clear speed, especially on those multi-target camps. Overall, this champion is something I'd never really recommend for new and even like pretty skilled players of the game. You have to primarily just be an OTP of this pick for a while to really get a feel for it. And outside of like Grandmaster higher, Rengar is one of the most elite skewed picks in the game. Like, you're really going to struggle outside of these elos. Something I just wouldn't really recommend playing at the moment unless he gets some sort of rework or a lot of power put back into his kit. Silas is also underperforming. This is primarily as a way of keeping him from being too... They don't want him to be too strong in the jungle. That's the main thing. When they gave him the health ratios, he lost a bit of power from that. I do think there is some sort of power that he could definitely gain here and not be overwhelming within the jungle, but in his current state, he's definitely not doing as well as he has done for the earlier half of last split, where he was actually finding a bit of a footing in the jungle. Overall, he's going to stay in the D tier for the moment. Pantheon is going to be within my C tier. I'm adding him back as he got buffed this patch, and he does see some jungle play. It looks like Eclipse and Youmuu's are competitive first item options, with Youmuu's looking to be slightly more performant. It gives you that mobility, which Pantheon kind of lacks on ganks. His ganks obviously come down to being able to get in range of W and then utilizing both his damage and ally damage to take it down the target. You don't need Eclipse as much because obviously you're pairing him alongside other champions to output that damage, and oftentimes that will be enough to single target someone down. But in his current state, not enough mobility really. He needs that Youmuu's to kind of get into lane and get active around the map. Do I think the item's great? Not really. I think there's definitely, it's definitely lackluster compared to what it has been in the past. It is only a flat 20 out of combat movement speed, with obviously the active giving 20% to melee champions when used for 6 seconds. So yeah, Pantheon gonna be within my C tier for the moment. The buffs did obviously help his clear speed very slightly. Nothing to really shout about, but he stays within my C tier. Well, I imagine he would have been C tier still last patch. The buffs just weren't really enough to push him outside of it. The other champions within my C tier are mostly mainstays. The likes of Gragas is pretty elite skewed, also just a bit underperformant within the jungle at the moment. Kindred, also very elite skewed, very reliant on snowballing, certain conditions to really operate and function well within the game. Nidalee, I mean, we all know the story about this champion and how just oppressive she can be when played by the right people. If you underperform on this pick, then you really will feel it. If you're confident, then definitely you can put some games in and find success. But overall, not something I'd really recommend going to as an option at the moment. Vi has been underperforming primarily because of her competitive presence. It's really taken a bit of a toll on her in solo queue at the moment. Eve has been weak for a while. I think this champion should have been buffed a long time ago. They kind of just overswung with this pick, with this champion, and she's just been underperforming ever since the nerfs to like her Q and her ultimate, and I believe her W slow got tagged as well in amongst that. Hecarim has definitely been pushed to more being better in the hands of people who have put a lot of time into the champion. He's a bit more skillful in his current state. I do think he's a bit weak though still, but you can definitely find angles where you can snowball, get advantages, and really make use of this champion's mobility and kit. Overall, it's not something I'd really recommend going to though at the moment, unless once again, like a lot of the C tier picks, you're willing to sink a lot of time into the champion. And then Zed. Zed's obviously a champion which tends to come from the mid lane. If you're very good at playing Zed as a mid lane option, then you should be able to pilot him relatively well within the jungle. He has a very fast clear speed. He doesn't have obviously the level of ganks potential which a lot of the other junglers do. He has no hard CC. His best soft CC ability is his slow on his E, which is 30%, I believe. Might scale slightly there, but the champion definitely very much reliant on like knowledge of the kit. If you don't really play Zed, just not something I'd really recommend either. Moving on to the B tier then. So this is where I'd start like saying you could probably play these champions and find some decent success, but maybe they're a bit more situational or require a bit less time, or maybe don't have as much maybe you can get up to the point where they can function without sinking too many games into them. Lee Sin has moved up. So Lee Sin obviously got 3 base AD this patch. That's pretty huge for him. He has loads of AD ratios which he can benefit from that. I believe his Q and his E have been moved to total AD ratios. I know his E, off the top of my head, has. I can't remember if his Q has as well at this point, but yeah, he definitely does benefit from that. It helps his clear speed, it helps his overall damage, and yeah, moves up to the B tier. He was also someone who had lost a bit of power, kind of akin to the likes of Pantheon, with the bruiser items coming down a bit harder than some of the other options. Talon, kind of akin to Zed, but has a bit more potential as a jungler. They've actually just completely stripped off the jungle modifier on the W. It went from 175%, I think, at one point to 100%, like, which is crazy to think about, what we were ever at that stage and like point where Talon had such an absurd monster modifier on that ability. Yeah, it got taken off when they gave him buffs not too long ago on the W. I believe the damage when it comes back to you gained a bit there, and obviously they took it off then. But anyway, I digress. Yeah, the champion is still solid as a jungler. If you get the invades, you get the kills, then you can really snowball and take advantage of a game. If you don't play Talon, not something I'd really recommend, but you can definitely still make him function if you get some early kills within the game. Shaco is underperforming at the moment. I believe AP Shaco is slightly better than AD Shaco, but is a bit more conditional depending on what kind of game you're playing. Overall, just make sure you're picking what you need within that game. If you don't put time into Shaco, it's probably once again not really worth playing this champion. He is pretty OTP driven, and yeah, that is the main kind of catch with this champion. He's very reliant on early snowballing when playing AD, and then very reliant on his control when playing AP. Kha'Zix is still going to be within my B tier. I think he's like a high B tier option, less of a low B tier option. I wouldn't have him on the same level as the other 3 champions here. He obviously did get once again hit by the bruiser, the bruiser itemization and the assassin itemization going down, as he does dabble within both pools depending on what build you are going within the game. Rek'Sai has once again gone back to being one of the most unpopular junglers. She is definitely struggling for her pick rate. I think this champion should actually just be on the strong side permanently, because if she's ever like kind of neutral to like weak, which I would say she's kind of leaning and treading towards at the moment, then she loses like all of her play rate. The AoE knockup is nice. It does give her some more team fighting potential, but in her current state, she's more like a mid to low B tier option. I'd have her beneath Kha'Zix, and if you don't play Rek'Sai, then once again, it's probably not something you're really looking into at playing. Sejuani is obviously doing a bit better with the tank itemization being less nerfed, but she still is pretty prohibited by her dominance in competitive, just not to the same kind of tier as like Maokai, who is basically dead within solo queue. That champion's like a D tier pick. Don't even really see him in solo queue anymore because of just how unpopular he is. Sejuani sits as like a mid B tier option. Poppy actually treads fairly even within jungle. She received enough to her passive, enough to her E, but they gave her back some Q damage to jungle monsters. They wanted to make sure they didn't just kill that off completely. And yeah, she treads water. Once again, really good in counter pick scenarios. Lee Sin becoming better and more popular. Great for Poppy. She's a great answer to Lee Sin. You can really make use of that W and really deny him ever getting onto your backline or ever having like great 1v1 dueling potential against you. Wukong is going to remain in my B tier. He's been gaining a bit of popularity, but then has lost some of that going into this split. He has kind of gone down a bit with the itemization. Not a huge amount. He was like an A tier pick, and he sits as like a mid B tier pick now. Graves doing better with Collector being a bit cheaper. He obviously really values that item. I still think he's very hard to pilot, and if you don't pilot him well, then you can definitely struggle. But if you're going down the crit route, then oftentimes you can just stat check and just explode someone for the sake of it. This pick obviously can spike really aggressively, like later on when you have like your 3-4 crit item builds, and yeah, you're outputting a huge amount of damage. Early on into the game, he's very skillful and very reliant on like executing combos, executing invades and ganks correctly to make sure he stays ahead, or well, I mean stays tempo and ahead of the curve of the game, to make sure he's still relevant, like mid lane. Overall, the champion, pretty hard to execute, but sits within my B tier at the moment. Tilia is also with my B tier. This champion lost a bit of power with Liandry's being nerfed this patch. Obviously, kind of relied on Fated Ashes. Luden's Companion was something she could also opt into, that it also got nerfed this patch alongside Storm Surge. So some of her itemization options got nerfed, and I'd say she goes from like a high B to like a mid to low B tier option. She's kind of faded out of the meta at this point. Not something I'd really recommend playing, but if you do enjoy her and you find success, then she's still something you could definitely opt into. Belveth is going to stay within my B tier. Champion obviously tends to be pretty elite skewed. I don't think it's healthy for her to be elite skewed. I actually think she should be someone who's accessible to like the general player base, but really isn't in her current state. Whether they'll rectify that, I don't know. I know there are a lot of Belveth mains, which, I mean, obviously enjoy the playstyle of the current champion. But overall, sits as like a B tier option. If you can snowball, get advantages in the game, then you can oftentimes completely take over. If you're not comfortable on the pick and you're not getting advantages, then it's just worth looking at other options ahead of her. Echo, not doing as well as he has done in the past. He kind of sits as like a mid to high B tier option. I wouldn't say he's weak, but he's not as steamrolly as he once upon a time was. But he can still definitely 1v9 games if you give him a lot of gold. Jax, pretty conditional as a jungler. That is mostly what it comes down to. If you can find the matchups which really fit you and like what work for him, whether that's like primarily auto attack based matchups or just into specific compositions, then Jax can definitely have value as a flex pick jungler. Outside of that, though, you're not really going to be playing Jax. He is definitely something which comes in as a counter pick predominantly. Trundle mainly just stays in the B tier for his ease of play. I think this champion could probably do with some, I don't want to say buffs, but maybe like adjustments. Because if he's ever good, which, I mean, I think a pick like Trundle should be good for just the average player, as he is one of the easiest champions to play in the game. He is a stat checking auto attacker, with W, which is just an attack speed and a movement speed steroid, and E, which is a terrain creation ability. His R is a point and click stat check. His Q is a point and click stat check. Like, this champion is just inherently incredibly easy to play. Like, he is someone who I should be able to go to people and they're like, if you're starting the game, play Trundle. He's really easy. Would I do that over the last season? Probably not. I just don't think Trundle's been there, and it's kind of unfortunate. Overall, I'm going to have him in the B tier for the moment. He probably should be buffed, but obviously competitive becomes a problem. So Trundle in the B tier for the moment. Ivan is also with my B tier. I believe if you itemize him correctly, he still stays as a relevant option. If you know the Ivan clear, then he's pretty solid as like an enchanter option. He's definitely something you could go to. I'd say the importance of Ivan is learning the clear. Make sure you've got that down. Make sure it's as efficient as possible. And make sure you're using Daisy correctly. Getting a lot of value out of your summon is, half of this champion for the most part. She is very powerful if used correctly. Overall, if you nail those two things, then then Ivan definitely shoots up to like the S tier. But for the more generalistic audience, I do think he's more like a B tier option in his current state. But there's definitely a lot of room to grow on this champion. Moving down from the A tier, we have three champions. We have Karthus, who lost a bit of power with Liandry's being nerfed. That's mostly what it just comes down to. He still has great DPS, but Fated Ashes, Liandry's being nerfed, hits his clear a bit, and that is something which this champion's really, what's the word I'm looking for? A lot of this champion's power comes from just how quickly it clears, and taking it down does hurt it. So, it drops from the A tier to the B tier, but he still has incredible DPS. Skarner and Ramos are the other two options. In Skarner's case, he's become quite elite skewed. This wasn't surprising. He was overpowered last patch. They took a decent amount of power out of him. I'd say he sinks to like below B tier, and honestly, this might even be generous. He could probably drop to the C tier. If you don't put games into him, he's just not worth playing again. If you do, and you're willing to learn him, then he can definitely once again rise back up as like an A, maybe not S tier option anymore, but like pretty close to the S tier. In Ramos's case, this champion's bad. The main thing going for him is the fact that he's really good into AD compositions, and he's really easy to play. But outside of that, his itemization is bad. He's really composition dependent, and honestly, it puts him pretty close to the C tier. I do think Ramos needs to be buffed. I don't know what direction they want to take with him, but yeah, the full analysis patch really did hit him quite hard. So drops all the way down to like a low B tier option. Just not something I'd really recommend unless into full AD compositions. But even then, you might find more success on just comfort picks. So yeah, it's kind of he's definitely not doing too hot in his current state. Mordekaiser leads off the A tier. I had a bug last time when I tried to move him, and yeah, he was an S tier pick, and now he drops down to the A tier. He did get nerfed this patch, and it did hurt his clear speed, it hurts his dueling potential, but he's still a great jungler. Obviously, Fated Ashes was something he could also abuse. He did like items like Leandry, so he does lose some power there, but still a very solid A tier pick. Nunu saw his first gaming competitive in 7 years, I believe it is, which is crazy to think about. Maybe not competitive, maybe Worlds specifically. I actually can't remember the date off the top of my head, but Inspire Play Nunu, he played Redemption Rush, I believe, which is definitely something you can opt into, like a more utility focused Nunu. But for solo queue, you can definitely opt into your AP variations, your tank variations. He's generalistically pretty good at the moment. Is he? I mean, I think he's deceptively hard to play, which is what a lot of people don't give credit to Nunu players for. You don't usually see Nunu players outside of like OTPs, which is why oftentimes it might be perceived that he's actually relatively easy to play, but there's skill involved in playing Nunu. If you enjoy the champion, put some time into him, you should find good results. Nunu, gonna be with my A tier. Xin Zhao, obviously very boring champion, but he can get the job done. Maybe not as effectively as Jarvan at the moment. Jarvan is the champion which I'd recommend over Xin Zhao if you're looking for another pick with relatively similar playstyles. But yeah, he's a good A tier pick, not much more to it, like the champion. Diana is going to be my A tier. She got buffed a lot, actually a while ago at this point. They gave her the attack speed help, which has just kept her relevant within the jungle. Echo didn't receive a buff like that, which is why he's kind of faded down a bit. But Diana, yeah, solid A tier pick. Teemo, okay, what? I'm glad this champion has finally found his popularity within the jungle. I mean, obviously, we've kind of got to thank Broxah for that. I know a lot of people have kind of picked up at Teemo because, on top of the ASU, because Broxah plays him. And, yeah, he's been pretty good for a while. And I know back along, I got criticized for having Teemo, like, high up in my jungle tier list. But I really do think people slept on him for the good part of, like, the last year. So, Teemo, gonna be over my A tier. I genuinely think this champion's actually pretty good at the moment. His clear is good, his dueling potential is good, he has great zone control. Obviously, he doesn't have the hard CC, which a lot of the other junglers have, but his Q is a very powerful tool, especially if you can get it onto like a marksman, get it onto like a bruiser, which is dependent on their autos. This pick's got good potential, and yeah, very deserving of an A tier spot at the moment. Gwen is pretty elite skewed, especially within like the jungle and the top lane. Obviously is benefiting from higher HP pools, has a good clear. It doesn't have the hard CC as well, kind of akin to like Teemo. She actually follows a pretty similar scaling path, just Teemo's a bit easier to play, and Gwen's strengths come from obviously her tank killing capability. But yeah, the champ's definitely in a good spot at the moment. I don't think she's quite S tier. Maybe in high elo, I'd say she gets closer to that point. But for more mid, low elo, if you put the time in, then yeah, you can definitely be rewarded. But since it's more like a mid A tier pick at the moment. Briar, okay, so Briar is an awkward one. This pick is very low elo skewed. I mean, that is just what it comes down to. She doesn't really see play outside of like Diamond for the most part. It's not a champion I'd recommend putting time into, but if you do enjoy it, then it's definitely an option there for you. I think this champion's kit's in a bit of an odd spot at the moment, and she can be very stat checky. Obviously, if you can get onto a target with your Q and then W with PTA, then she can output a huge amount of damage, but she's, yeah, very low elo skewed. The bruiser itemization changes took her from like a high A to like a low A tier pick, which just makes it so I can't really recommend her as an option, but there's no taking away from her. She is still a good low / mid elo pick at the moment, just not something I'd really recommend going to, unlike some of these other options which I say still have decent potential in the higher ranks. Elise. Now, Elise is a champion I really like at the moment. I think Elise has definitely been on the rise ever since she received her quality of life changes. She was pretty bad for like the most part of this year. Definitely not doing too well, but yeah, the quality of life changes combined with some of the other champions being nerfed within the jungle have definitely opened up a path for her to be more successful. I think in Elite she's actually probably an S tier pick. For mid elo, probably sits as more like a mid A tier pick at the moment, but I definitely think this champion has a lot of potential, and if you're willing to put time into Elise, I definitely think she is up there as one of the best junglers in the game at the moment. I think Kane is still pretty good, definitely something you can go back to if you're looking for someone which has obviously the two forms, an assassin form and a bruiser form. Bruiser items and assassin items both did get nerfed a bit, but he does have like certain options which he can opt into, which won't hit as hard as some of the others. The likes of Hubris obviously is still very good, especially if you're snowballing, can be really valuable on lethality. And then Bruiser has like different items you can opt into, whether that's like your Eclipses, your Sterixes, your Shojans, and you can kind of dabble around with what you need. Cleaver, obviously, very nice, especially into like heavy armor compositions. Overall, this pick, yeah, just a solid A tier option at the moment. Brand stays in the A tier. He also did get hit by Fated Ashes being nerfed. He goes from like a mid to high A tier pick to like a lower A tier pick. He's kind of been all over the place as of recently. They keep changing like the items and just the power of this champion, and overall, yeah, he stays relevant as like an A tier pick. He's mostly dependent on his items, obviously, being a great abuser of Leandri and Rylai. Both these items work wonders on him. Yeah, he's a solid A tier pick at the moment. Zac is definitely doing a bit better, with tank itemization being a bit better. So yeah, Zac benefits from that. He has the AP variation with like Leandri, and then you opt into like some of the tankier items, but overall, this pick, yeah, just doing a bit better at the moment. Less damage in the game enables him to pick up his blobs more consistently and sustain fight for a bit longer, which is what this champion really values. He's great in the mid game, falls off of a bit later on, and can be a bit vulnerable early with a bit slower of a clear compared to a lot of the other junglers, but he's still a very good A tier pick at the moment. Fiddlesticks stays within my A tier. This champion obviously also got hit with Leandri's and Fated Ashes being nerfed, kind of akin to, the four other champions here actually, which is Udyr, Shyvana, Lilia, and Amumu. All four of these champions got hit by Fated Ashes. They kind of get scattered a bit more, but Fiddle stays relevant as an A tier pick. He goes from like a high A tier to like a mid A tier pick, but he's still very good. Can have great team fight potential, especially with that ultimate, which is very powerful, especially if used correctly. Amumu actually drops to like a mid-A, low-A tier pick now. I think they overswung with the Amumu hotfix, and then obviously they specialed him by nerfing his items as well, so did lose a bit of power there. He's still solid. He has a great CC, very easy to play, so I don't think he needs to be buffed. I think the champion's probably in about a balanced spot, but I think he's a very good introductory jungler for new players, so I do think he should be on the strong side, but that's just like my personal opinion. Overall, yeah, stays relevant as like a mid-A tier pick, just not quite the free win in low elo, which he might have once been. The two champions dropping down are going to be Udyr and Shyvana. In Udyr's case, he lost power. Actually, there's three champions which I need to put in the A tier. I'll have the other two as well. So Udyr's case, he actually drops to like a low A tier pick. He got directly nerfed, combined with the Andrew being nerfed. He is, just a bit weaker. He doesn't clear as fast. He doesn't have the same level. That is the main thing. He just doesn't clear as fast with both the item and the nerfs to his Q monster damage and his R monster damage. Obviously, they nerfed his E movement speed, so he doesn't quite have the same level of chase, but that isn't as impactful as like the continuous clear nerfs which he has received. So he drops from the S tier to the mid to low A tier. In Yee's case, he jumps from the B tier to the A tier. He's definitely benefiting from like lethal tempo at the moment, combined with some of the other champions being nerfed. He comes back up as like a solid A tier pick. Not quite like a high A tier, but like a mid to low A tier. And Shyvana drops from the S tier to the A tier. She's still stronger in low elo, but she's kind of faded back down again. Obviously gets hit by Fated Ashes being nerfed and direct champion nerfs, so yeah, drops to the low A tier. And we have 6 champions here, so the S tier I actually think is the smallest it's been in a while. I actually moved one of these champions up. I moved Nocturne back up. He obviously got hit by Stridebreaker being nerfed, but he's just come back up as like a really solid option again. Some of the other champions being nerfed has helped him. Even though Stridebreaker did get nerfed pretty heavily, he still has like Hexblade as a fallback option. And then we've seen some like lethality variants. I know Vigar V2 really likes Voltaic Cycler Sword Nocturne. he played it against me, and that wasn't very fun. I did get one shot a couple of times, but there was definitely like potential in that, even though it's like 0.5% pick rate. Yeah, definitely give it a try, and then like give your thoughts. But I'd be really interested to hear what people think of that build, as it's pretty experimental at the moment. But overall, yeah, Nocturne pushes himself back up into the S tier. Volibear is one of my favorite go-tos. This champion, obviously, very clear cookie cutter play style. You've got great dive potential, you've got great stat checking potential. His point and click CC gives him like very, very simple ganks, and yeah, this champion is in a great spot at the moment, a very deserving S tier pick in both the jungle and the top lane. In Jarvan's case, Jarvan and Viego are like lower S tier picks at the moment. Jarvan did get hit by the boost itemization and could probably drop down to the A tier. I don't think he's quite a locked S tier pick, but because of just how easy like to execute he is once again, with the EQ combo being great CC, great damage, and his R being obviously a great tool for both just lockdown and damage, it gives him just a very simplistic playstyle and can like allow your teammates to really like play around you quite consistently, which is why I do just value Jarvan as a pick. In Viego's case, you get one good reset and this champion can really snowball throughout the game. That is the main thing with this pick though. Get that reset, get that value, and yeah, you should be good to go. Obviously his clear is still pretty good. He did lose 5 damage on his Q to monsters, but then gained that back through base AD on 14.18. But yeah, he's still a very strong pick at the moment. The itemization is a bit weaker for him, but still an S tier pick. In Warwick's case, he's beginning to gain a lot of play rate. I don't know why. I actually haven't seen anyone really talking about this champion, but he's been on the rise for a while. Like, he is the 6th most popular jungler in the game, and I don't hear anyone talking about him, which is crazy to think about. Overall, yeah, this pick's just doing really well at the moment. He's been doing well for a while, though. I think I've had him on my S tier for like the last 10 patches, but the boost itemization changes didn't really affect him a huge amount. He still opted into things like Bork. Like Titanic, still a very solid option for him. Stridebreaker did get nerfed a bit harder, but it tends to be primarily used into range compositions. But overall, yeah, the pick's just doing quite well at the moment. And then Lilia, I feel like Lilia's always in the S tier. This pick just has like a reservation here. Did drop down to the A tier very briefly, but then benefited from higher health pools. Didn't get hit quite as hard as some of the other AP options with the Fated Ashes and Leandry's damage to monsters nerf. And yeah, she's a solid S tier pick. Once again, I would say she's like, yeah, she's one of the front runners. If you're looking for AP, then Lilia is my recommended go-to. The likes of Elise is actually really solid and like really on the rise, especially if you're very comfortable with a champion. Amumu can still be something you opt into if you're still looking for like AP options and you're not quite as comfortable on like your Lilias and your Elises. Honestly, the AP pool is quite it's definitely on the downfall at the moment. AD picks definitely look to be a bit more dominant with like your Volibears, your Jarvans, your Nocturnes, Viegos definitely all being like really standard meta stuff. Warwick obviously gaining popularity is a very solid option. Xin Zhao, pretty unpopular, but still an AD option for you there. And overall, yeah, I'd say the jungle meta is pretty locked down at the moment. Actually, would I say it's locked down? I'd say it's more, it's definitely shifted. I don't know if I'd say it's locked. I think there are definitely things which could like shift it around pretty quickly if like they nerf specific items or they nerf specific champions. But overall, those are my 6 front runners. I think if you're looking for elite picks, then like, yeah, your Elises, your Gwans can still be very good. And yeah, those are my thoughts. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.